We're going to call the Board of Adjustment to order. First, let me announce that all decisions of the board are final. If there's anyone agree by the decision of this board, they may appeal to circuit court within 15 days of the board's decision. Also, no permits or license can be issued until that 15-day appeal period has expired and no appeal has been filed. For information regarding the board's decision or an appeal to circuit court, the Office of Land Use Administration will be your contact. As you come to the podium, address your questions to the board, not to others in the audience or to the staff. And I would ask that the board members remember to turn the microphones on as they make comments or questions. First, we'll do a roll call. Oh, one other point. Electronic devices, turn them off or on silent so we don't have any disturbance during the meeting. All right, roll call. Mr. Davis? Absent. Mr. Coleman? Here. Mr. Metcalf? Here. Mr. Burrows? Here. Mr. Milling? Here. Mr. Golden? Here. And I'm William Guest. We have a quorum. Takes 5 members to affirm a motion, either up or down. And Mr. Anderson is here as our attorney. All right, and since we have a large group, I'm going to read over some other conditions that I normally kind of breeze through, but for the sake of time and consideration for everyone's opinion. First, an application on the agenda will be called, then we'll have the applicant up to give their name, address, and their presentation, after which the board members will ask questions, and then we'll ask for members of the public to either give statements either in firm or in opposition to a motion, or to an application, I should say. Only 4 from each position, so pick your best 4. And we have, sometimes people will want to come back and ask or add to their comments, and we don't do that unless we call, the board members call for that person to come back up. So don't keep coming up and back and forth trying to add to your statements as somebody else says something. You're limited to 5 minutes. You'll hear a little ding on the little table over here, and that'll allow you 1 more minute to speak. Now, I try to be considerate, but we have a large group, and so if one person makes a point, don't come up and make the same point. If you can add to it, that'll probably be beneficial to your point and your position. After all opposition speakers have finished, I usually do all those in firm and then those in opposition. Then the applicant will be given an opportunity to respond. And then at that point, the board will ask questions. Once again, the board is who you speak to. You don't speak to others in the audience or an attorney or somebody on the staff as it relates. After the hearing, the board will go into deliberation. We'll give a decision today on each of the applications, or we may ask for a holdover or make a motion for a holdover, but usually a decision is made on today. It requires 5 minimum votes, once again, to affirm a motion, and I think that pretty well covers any of the main points that I need to cover. And we'll go in order, and luckily, probably the one most everybody's here for is the first application, which is a holdover for 5054 OCR LLC, and that's for 5070 5054 Old Shell Road. So if the applicant will come forward.
Good afternoon. My name is Casey Pipes, 2255 Ashland Place, for the applicant here. This is the Rester Brothers site. It's part of this project. Y'all have heard this one before. I've got 5 minutes, so I'm going to talk fast, but I'd love questions at the end. This Rester Brothers site has been a gas station since the 1950s, according to the records we found. It was in continuous operation until just a few months ago, and it is what we call a legal non-conforming use. It is a B3 use, even though we're in an R1 zone. The use variance is not technically required to have a restaurant at this site because we're allowed to continue the automobile use or to change to any other B3 or lesser commercial use. The staff had initially told us we needed to apply for the variance in connection with the courtyard being an expansion of the site, but the previous use of the site encompassed all of that property with the driveways, outdoor storage, and parking areas for the vehicles. And so we don't believe the use variance is technically required for the restaurant use to go on that site, but we have we are continuing forward with the variance request at the staff's initial direction, and there are variances that we would like to put this to the best use possible for the project and for the neighborhood. You'll hear about the word hardship a lot at these meetings. The hardship for the Rester Brothers site itself is it's a commercial building. It was built, designed, and intended for commercial use. It can't be adapted to residential use, and any tear down of the building and corresponding environmental mitigation would make it prohibitive to put this building or this site to any other use than the current filling station use, which we don't view as desirable. The parking area on the vacant lot, that was Block B on the old Country Club Village subdivision. It was always intended as a commercial lot. Its companion is Block A, which is where the food pack and the lodge is now, and they both fronted on a big wide curve of Old Shell Road. And Block A, Block B, and the Rester Brothers lots were all designated as commercial when it was first developed in '43. And when the buyer, Horace Long, bought it in '46, he actually got a commitment from the owner that no other property would be commercial in that subdivision. He bought it in '46, and it's still in the Long family now. The vacant lot was originally designed, it's sort of a P-shaped lot, it curves around, it's got right-of-way on all four sides. To the south, it looks like a parking lot, but that's really Old Shell Road, right-of-way. To the north is an alley that's never been opened, and then you have open streets east and west. It provides a very unique problem for development of Lot B for any type of structure or use under the zoning codes. We not really need a use variance to put it to a parking lot because a private parking lot, as opposed to a commercial lot, isn't really a use that's regulated under the districts in any part of the city. We're not charging people to park or store vehicles there like a commercial lot. It's a non-commercial parking lot. But with all the crunch in of all the setbacks and everything else, it would be a challenge to develop it, and it was originally designed to orient south towards what's now a parking lot that the city has built in front of it, but it was supposed to originally orient the way the food pack and the lodge do towards kind of this park and right-of-way bubble area. The variances, a lot of the variances go to mitigating possible adverse consequences of this restaurant use. A higher wall along Border Street, which we don't envision impacting traffic or having any adverse impact, but would help limit the noise, sight, light. The building in the north end, which is a separate structure, which we've asked for, allows for some increased flexibility to save trees on the Rester Brothers site. It also provides additional shielding to the neighbors to the north. The side yard setback to allow the courtyard to essentially be as wide as the building is, or as close to the side street as the building is now, allows for better use of the courtyard in an area that's not right up next to one of the property lines or one of the neighbors. The alternative surface material on the parking area, Lot B, is designed to address the fact that there's stormwater issues in the area already. We don't want to make them worse. This is an attempt at making them better. It also provides for more likely ability to save the trees that are existing there and the natural vegetative cover that already exists on that commercial Lot B. Again, we feel like the requested variances would allow for a beneficial use of this site for the first time in a long time, maybe a use that looks in keeping with the surrounding area and the community. It's allowed to be converted by right to B3, which involves a whole parade of uses that people may not like, even less than they may not like a restaurant. But we're proposing these variances in order to put in a viable restaurant use at this site that would kind of take care of Block B, which has previously been recommended for rezoning to commercial in the past, although it's never been put to it. It would lock up that parcel and this parcel as one kind of neighborhood restaurant use.
Okay, any questions of the board for the applicant's rep? All right, you referenced the initial plat or conditions of the development of this area?
Yes.
Do we have a record of that has been provided staff?
I have, I don't know if I've provided that to the staff, but there was, it was the old Country Club Village subdivision from 43, and there are restrictive covenants that are of record, and I can provide those to the staff. And it essentially said everything's residential except A, B, and lots 33, 34, and 35. And Rester Brothers is only on 33 and 34 of Block F. But those covenants were recorded back in 43, the agreement with Mr. Long.
About the Titans, and that I think is one of the little boys, because that looks like
I know, that's what we're trying to find.
about the Titans, and that I think is one of the little boys, because that looks like
I know, that's what we're trying to find. I think this is one of the kids.
about the Titans, and
Executive session second. Yeah, I'll double check what he wants. Okay. Executive session second. Yeah, I'll double check what he wants. Okay. I think I'll call it. I'll let you know short.
Regular meeting of Mobile County Commission for July 25th, 2017. We'd like to welcome to the podium Minister Jamarcus Rabb, Youth Minister at the Mount Calvary Missionary Baptist Church for our invocation, and please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Let us pray. Eternal and all-wise God, our Father, our Creator, Lord, we come before your presence in the name of your Son, Jesus the Christ. Lord, we thank you, dear Lord, for this day, for this is the day that you have made, and we are rejoicing and we are glad in it. We thank you, dear Lord, for us assembling together this morning and for your many bountiful blessings, dear Lord, that you have bestowed upon us. Now, Lord, we ask, dear Lord, that you would forgive us our sins and create in us a clean heart and renew in us the right spirit. God, we ask, dear Lord, that you would bless this city.
Just to pave the parking lot, and we would rather use the rock alternative surface material mainly for drainage reasons. Paving that area in there would impact the trees and the amount of impervious surface.
But there is alternative materials for impervious surface. I think the staff referenced that in their assessment of the application. Okay, and then the reduced landscaping, I understand that. There's quite a bit actually around that site, so. All right. I have no further questions. Once again, any questions of the board?
Mr. Chairman? Oh, go
Hold
ahead.
on, Mr. Milling.
Casey, what is the overall plan for the property as far as the operation of it? I know it seems like that's been a little bit gray. Do you have a feel for, operating hours, what type of operation is going to be run there? Is there going to be late night music?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And I already messed up. I was supposed to introduce the other people that were here on the applicant team. If I'm not able to answer a question, we also have John Vallis, Charles Island, Courtney Cashburn Brett, the architect for it. But the idea is a restaurant, use. The idea is not a music venue bar. It's to have it as a restaurant. I believe previously, in connection with either the first or the second time this was set on an agenda, there were some operating hour restrictions to try to give people comfort that the variance would be attached to a condition that would limit the outdoor seating area. It would not just be open for drinking. It wasn't just a bar. It was open as part of the restaurant use. But the idea is to have a restaurant here. It doesn't work as a bar. It's not in a bar district or area. It's not where you would normally put a bar. It's was to allow a restaurant use. We thought that, kind of lined up with what the zoning code already talks about of what's allowed and what's not and what that means. But we didn't split it finer to say it's going to be
to protect the health, safety, and general welfare of the public. They believe that the noise, the refuse, and the trash issues would negatively impact the neighborhood. How in the world did they stand and object to a small office with 8 parking spots that closed at 5? And now they're supporting a 160-seat with an outside bar that will have room for people to stand and say it's not going to negatively impact our residences. When I walked door to door, I showed them the variances. I did not say anything about partying. And I went to a small meeting at the park where I told people that, and they agreed. We have someone sitting in the audience that said, Pat talked about traffic and noise. So it really concerns me that we did not bring out what other people suggested. You know, we're having a severe problem in the park right now with dogs. How about if we go with the trend of a dog park? Perfect place. How about if we go with the trend of a splash pad? We can compete with Birmingham and Fairhope with that. And how about if we go with the trend of food trucks? How about if we think about if we want to be on trend, let's think about something small that will not negatively impact the lifestyle of all of us who didn't want to live in Midtown, who didn't want to live downtown. We chose where we live because of the quiet, because of the safety, and the walkability and the enjoyment of our neighbors. I thank you very much for listening to us, and I hope you truly will believe that this is not about a popularity contest. This is about the safety, the welfare, and not negating the enjoyment of our neighborhood. Thank you.
Any questions? Mr. Burrows?
Real simple question, man. You brought up, You brought up the fact that Comcast?
Yes.
What are you trying to say to me?
I'm trying to say to you that a little building with 8 parking spots was protested and shut down by our neighborhood because of the traffic, the noise, and the waste. A 160-seat restaurant isn't going to have more traffic, more noise, and more waste. Simply, Mr. Burrows, that's what I'm saying.
Are you aware whether that application came before this board?
It came before the zoning board and was turned down. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Any further questions?
Did I exceed my time? Can I say one more thing?
Ask your question.
Do y'all remember that you asked me to meet for a compromise meeting? I want you to know that I did send an email to Shaw asking for a compromise meeting, even though we'd already had several with him, asking for a smaller restaurant, asking for shorter hours, and he declined to meet with us. I just wanted you to know I did what you asked me to do, Mr. Coleman, and he declined to meet with us.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next.
Good afternoon. I'm Tom Sharp. I live at 304 Long Court, which is about 600 feet away from the restaurant or the planned development. It's to the north. We can hear ambulances and so forth from at our house that are on Old Shell Road. And as I read this application that's been submitted, it's clear that it's for a full bar. It's for a bar that would seat 160 people with outdoor seating for 80 people. In looking on the web at the information that the developer has for, as I appreciate it, he may be the owner of the Hangout at the Gulf and also a place called the Gulf, and he invites events at his facilities down there. And knowing that you have a full bar there, knowing that you have to the east a residence that was owned by the Long family and sold to another party within the last year or two that's maybe 40 feet away, one to the north in Country Club Village that may be 40 feet to the north, basically surrounded by residences other than the park, which is a park for elementary school age children and toddlers. And so with that in mind, knowing that the developer wants to have a full bar, seating 160 people, not to say that would be the limit of the people served on events, from 11 to 11 on the weekends. It occurs to me that, first of all, we are exposing the people that are using that parking lot that's already a lot there on Old Shell Road serving the park to people who have been drinking alcohol and an open bar. It's clear it's a full bar. I can't imagine anything closer than asking this board to approve that use 200 feet from an elementary school. I know there may be different rules that apply, but it's the same sort of thing. What if that was an elementary school parking lot? The other thing, my concern is the noise. As I say, we can hear noise from Old Shell Road. The application says that they will have outdoor games, fire pit. I don't want to listen to their noise until 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock on the weekends at a commercial establishment. I'm 600 feet away. There are other neighbors here that are, as I say, 40 feet away, 20 feet away. There's a lot of harm that will be done to these neighbors if this variance is granted. And finally, on the parking, the application indicates that they will serve 375 people a day, that they will have a staff or employ up to 30 people. So I'm not that familiar at all at this moment with the parking regulations, but it's clear to me that parking will be a problem, that the patrons of this bar will be utilizing the parking spaces put there for the use of the patrons of the park, who will have toddlers and elementary age school children there. And so what you will have is you will have parking, the parking that was built for the park no longer being able to fully serve that, and likely a situation where another harm to be suffered by neighbors would be patrons of the bar parking in their front yard along North Border Drive. Finally, I would just say that I would not oppose another commercial use that would be consistent and, as was said earlier, in keeping with the neighborhood. There was a suggestion that this bar would be in keeping with the neighborhood, and I say, due to the size of it, the volume of people that are expected, that won't be the case. I might add one other thing. In support of this petition, some of the information suggested that the total development would cost $2 million. You can imagine what sort of happy hour you're going to have to run in order to support that. So thank you so much.
Any questions?
I've got a question.
Hold on, sir. Mr. Miller?
If it did not have music, would that affect your opposition to it? I mean, if it was a neighborhood restaurant, say like La Pizzeria was in the Linecoff district, or, you know, I've used Kitchen on George, but, you know, if it was something like that, still at the 160, you know, seat capacity, would that change your opposition to it?
If you know, to me, you don't completely eliminate the problem of a facility that's going to accommodate that many people with a full bar. I'm not opposed to a neighborhood restaurant. I guess that's everybody's definition, but I just have never been in a neighborhood restaurant that would seat 160 people. I'm just not familiar with one. That's a huge restaurant there. So, and I don't think that, even though that would be my primary concern, even though I've taken some grandchildren to the park before. I think it's the combination of the full bar and knowing how many people they intend to serve, right there abutting residences, a residential neighborhood, and a park for elementary children. Again, I don't oppose a much smaller neighborhood restaurant, much like Via Amelia or the Mediterranean Cafe or any of the ones that have been up near the Holiday. There's one there now. I'm not offended by that, and I don't, even though some people would resist the use of it for any use other than residential. This is too big, and the nearest thing I can compare with this is the Heroes bar and restaurant down the street, which has 88 spaces in the front, and it accommodates a lot of college students. So, in any event,
thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Did he address your questions? Any other questions? Okay, thank you. I think we have time for one more person. That's it? Okay, we've got an indecision as to who's going next.
How you want to handle that?
It's up to the audience.
You've already heard two lawyers. We've also heard two.
Yeah. I'm not opposed to one or the other. I have to pick, we have to have one more. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Steve Nicholas. I live at 14 Babs, which is about 750 feet to the northeast. From hearing today, I think reasonable people can disagree as to whether a restaurant should be or shouldn't be at this location. But frankly, I don't think this board ever gets to that question, because as you know, your question before you is whether the applicant has shown substantial hardship to get a variance. And Mr. Chairman, I think you had it right when you asked Mr. Pipes, for the real Rester Brothers location, you've asked for 3 or 4 variances. What's the substantial hardship for each of those? And the only answer is where there's a commercial building there now. That's not substantial hardship under the law. Substantial hardship has to run with the land itself and cannot be the use of the land put by an applicant or his predecessor in title. That's 1987 Alabama Supreme Court case. So the fact that there's a commercial building there now doesn't justify any of the variances for that piece of property. But more so when you look to the parking lot, which is what they need to greatly expand this project, there's nothing to show substantial hardship. The only thing that was talked about is, well, that was supposed to be zoned commercial in the first instance. But the problem with that is it wasn't. The problem with that is this board, looking for substantial hardship, doesn't have the authority to rezone that piece of property as if it were coming before you in the first instance. So history doesn't give you substantial hardship. The configuration of that property doesn't give you substantial hardship. I mean, there's nothing irregular about it that would prevent somebody from putting something there that's residential. So what I ask you to do when you come time to vote on this thing is to think about each of the requested variances and to think about, okay, what's my substantial hardship? Because if you do that, I don't think you can get there. Now, the other part about, the non-conforming use and all of that, it's very interesting that the applicant now says, well, I can put a restaurant there now without your approval based on continuing the non-conforming use. Taking that at face value, I don't concede it, but taking that at face value, that means they can put their neighborhood restaurant there, right? And do everything that they want to do just in a scope and a size that is more consistent with the way that property has been used for, a long time. But they don't want to do that. What they want to do is greatly expand it. And again, if you look at the Alabama law, and the lawyer, I can't help it, is what the Alabama Supreme Court says is the intention of the zoning laws as it regards non-conforming property is to restrict it rather than extend it. Given the objective of the zoning to eliminate non-conforming uses, courts throughout the country generally follow a strict policy against their extension or enlargement. What they're wanting to do here is to codify for all time this greatly expanded non-conforming use. And that's what we object to as the neighborhood. Now, to Jeremy's point, can a neighborhood restaurant work there and everybody be happy about it? Maybe. But why does it have to be one this large? Why does it have to be one that this board allows them to greatly expand beyond its current use, and to have that forever? When the problem is, what Mr. Pipes answers truthfully, is the plan may be to put something there that a lot of people would like. Some people maybe not so much, but a lot of people would like. But we all know, same thing with Five Guys was bought up that just went out. 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 2 years from now, if whatever they build there fails and somebody else comes in and now says, well, we've got a non-conforming use, we can put in a bar. We can stay open late. We can do all of those things that the promises are being made now won't happen, can happen. And that's the problem with what the neighborhood that I live in, that we have with it. What I asked this board to do is to follow your staff recommendation, which was to, at this hearing, determine what's the substantial hardship for each one of these variances. And I contend there's none, and ask you to deny the application.
Any questions? All right, thank you. Now we have time for the applicant to make a final statement regarding any of the comments.
Just very briefly, thank you. The variance requested here is to allow for what will be a viable project. We are all going into it, obviously, with the expectation and hope that what goes in succeeds. The use, and I heard several of the comments say that they wouldn't be opposed to a restaurant or they wouldn't be opposed to some commercial use. This Rester Brothers property has a vested right to a B3 commercial use today. Whether anybody likes it or not, or whether anybody approves of it or not, it's there. As long as it goes into some B3 or lesser commercial use in the next 2 years, that is vested and allowed to continue. We're trying to put in a project that is economically viable, feasible, and would add to this area of Spring Hill. And
just a second, please. Excuse me. All right.
And
we got to concentrate on what he says.
I was getting directions, I think, to go somewhere.
Yeah. No.
The hours of operation, that's a pretty objective thing. We're trying to commit to that. If y'all make that a condition of the approval, that'll follow this variance through the current owner and the future owner. It's a very easy standard to fix. The courtyard's closed at 10. I mean, we either comply with that or we're not on some day. If we violate it, it's a zoning code violation, and we'll be hearing from Mr. Anderson or somebody from the city about that in municipal court. But that's an easy standard to talk about. Before, and I wasn't here, but there was some discussion between this kind of music and a cellist playing or whatever playing, and I don't know what all that's about, but that gets into a harder standard of what are we talking about and how are you ever going to enforce it. We're trying to make it look like it's a restaurant by telling you that the courtyard's not going to be open past 10. That means it's pretty much not available as a college bar because the college people I knew don't go out till after 10. But the walls, the additional parking, the excess height, everything else, it's designed to mitigate these effects that could happen anyway by right on the Rester Brothers site. We don't want people parking illegally on Border. We don't want our patrons parking in the public spots that were built by the city at taxpayer money for the park. We're trying to build a parking lot next to a parking lot, but it's designed to cover our traffic and cover our patrons and employees. And that Rester Brothers site, as a legal non-conforming B3 use in an R1 zone, it is very unique. There might only be 4 in the city. There might be less. It is an extremely unique situation, and it lends itself to this hardship of it can't go back straight away to a full R1 use. This restaurant use is actually a step down to B2 from B3. The parking lot, it's another unique one. It's surrounded on all 4 sides by right-of-way. It's got very unique challenges to its development, but the whole point of that is to not have it be a standalone commercial building or residential building, but just handle the parking for this one. Thank
Okay.
you for your time.
Before you sit
Oh,
down,
yes.
questions of the board? Mr. Miller, start with.
Casey, do you have a feel, I know a couple times it's been mentioned about the environmental situation there. Has that been defined to any detail at all? I mean, is there current contamination
It
there?
has been defined to some extent. Our client, my client's the applicant. We don't own the property right now. And I'm not comfortable talking about, I mean, I don't know that it's up to us to tell the world what's going on out there from an environmental standpoint of somebody else's property.
Wouldn't that be a material matter for them prior to purchasing it?
It's material to my client, yes.
Yeah.
It's material to the owner of the property too, but we may, I mean, we're part of the due diligence of are we going to buy it or are we not going to buy it? And this is part of that process.
Do you know if, talking about hardships on the property with regards to R1 versus a B3, commercial type use, do you know if somebody tried to redevelop that property and there were environmental, contamination on the property, or there was environmental contamination on the property, do you know if that would be any different from a residential standpoint? Would that create a different hardship from a residential standpoint? Because I know on the commercial side that there are different standards if you've got residences on a property versus a commercial use.
Yeah, and this gets a little outside of what I'm comfortable with from a legal perspective. I'm not an environmental guy, but yeah, it's not tearing down the building helps greatly on what your environmental response is to a site, and not changing it to a daycare center or certain types of residential use, also mitigate or lessens whatever environmental issues might be out there.
Any further questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Metcalf?
we hear a lot about the size of the seats. How many, and it's 166, is that the number that we're talking about? Thereabouts?
Yeah, I believe it's 160 on the nose.
Okay. Out of that 160, I'm assuming that some of the courtyard is counted in that seating.
Half.
Okay, so it's half. So, as I think one person said, there's only a few months out of the year that people really can sit outside. So from a practical standpoint, outside seating may not be as much of an impact as one may think.
It's, it's true.
Yeah, I don't want to sit out there.
Oh, and if I said something, can she clarify my
Please.
answer real quick?
Name and address for the record.
Yes, sir. Courtney Brett. I live at 121 Houston Street. To help him clarify the seating count, we can't fit more than 20 tables that seat 4 people inside this restaurant. That's a very confined space. The addition that we're looking at is purely service addition in order to make sure that we can put in modern kitchens and bathrooms without doing the kind of environmental demolition of an existing slab and the property that's there. So we're talking about 20 tables that seat 4 people. The additional, we wanted to let people know that in those couple months out of the year, we could move those people outdoors for outdoor seating, but we couldn't fit more than 20 out there either. So we're talking about 20 tables, 4 seats each.
Inside and out.
Inside, and then, yes, we could fit up to 20 outside when the weather permits.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? All right, I have a few questions for you. And some of this is probably things for the staff as well, but well, I'm wondering whether I should direct it to the staff to begin with. If you'll just hold on a second.
Sure.
We'll start with, I understand that this area was annexed after the property, and the area was developed. And based on that information we received at the beginning, it showed that this was originally proposed to be business, but it's based on covenants, not necessarily, was a plat actually established having this as a business area?
The plat that I gave you, the 1942 or 43 plat, shows those 2 lots as commercial. The restrictive covenants don't restrict. Lots 33, 34, and 35 in Block F in the commercial blocks A and B, which is those two shown on the plat, are the only lots allowed to be used commercial. They're not restricted to commercial. They're the only ones in that subdivision that can. But that was done prior to the zoning ordinance. The zoning ordinance would.
Okay, so that leads to my next question. How did we end up with these being designated residential when they have been business for 40 years?
That's what the zoning ordinance.
I mean, why would...
That's how the city classified them when the zoning ordinance was passed back in the 50s or 60s.
So let's say the food pack as an example. Is that designated residential as well?
No, that's shown as commercial in that plan.
Okay.
And in the restricted coverage.
Well, it is residentially zoned. And when an area is annexed into the city, it comes in as R1 single-family residential, and that has been the standard practice per state code.
So it was forced into a non-conforming status just based on the city annexing the area?
Correct. The state code required it to be R1 at the time. There was a recent amendment to state code that does allow the city or cities now to do a zoning study and have a zoning plan in place when properties are annexed. But at the time this was annexed into the city, all properties came into the city as R1, whether they had commercial development on them or were just indicated as commercial on a plat.
Okay, now, just for clarification, the non-conforming use carrying over, the applicant could continue, I want to get an official reading on this, that it could continue in a business B3 status or less.
Correct. In what the two lawyers in opposition, or three lawyers, mentioned in opposition, that state law said you couldn't convert it. Our city zoning ordinance in 64-7 states a non-conforming use may be changed to another non-conforming use of the same classification. And below that, it has a chart, and it says in R1 districts, a B3 use can be changed, converted to a B2 use. So under our ordinance, that is allowed. Ordinance also, in that same section, states a non-conforming structure in which a non-conforming use is operated may be enlarged or extended on land owned on the effective date of the 1967 zoning ordinance or the effective date of any amendment hereto.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman? Oh, you still?
Yeah,
I'm
I've
sorry.
still got points. Okay, the noise, which has been a primary concern of the residents as well. Does this board have the authority to, other than the time, indicate any requirements regarding noise? I don't know that we've ever had that issue come up in any recent.
Other than the city's noise ordinance, I don't think we can.
Right. Which they would be subject to anyway.
Absolutely.
Okay. Just like the downtown Dolphin Street area or whatever.
Correct.
Okay. How many parking spaces, Bert, were they required to have?
I don't know that we ever got the...
Let's say for the 160.
Well, it's based on square footage, and I don't know that we ever received a square footage calculation for the outside seating area plus the inside,
Well, let's
the
start with the
footprint of the building.
inside. I'd like to know, based on, let's say you add the kitchen feature on to the existing building, and you have 20 seats or 20 tables, 4 to a table.
Yes.
80, so you're 80 inside.
That's how it's been calculated, and I believe we've exceeded the requirement by one space.
No, I'm just talking I just want to know what the requirement is for that, to start with.
What's the square footage inside?
I'm going to have to pull it 1 second. I have it on my sheet. I have my building area at 3,900 square feet.
Yes.
So that should require one space per 100.
So 39.
So 39 spaces, and I believe we have 40 or 41 on our application.
But that's including the off-site parking, though.
That's right.
How many employees?
I have been
Excuse
told that
me?
we wouldn't have more than 30, but not at all at one time.
But that's
I don't
to
know how
serve
break it out.
160, but max.
You need max per day?
No, you're just saying 160 seats, so 30 would be serving upwards of 160 at one time.
Right, I can't speak to who would be in the kitchen.
And I'm only going there, so we've got 30 employees, plus we've got a potential 160, so that's 190 potential individuals needing parking.
Yes, I don't think the 30 are all
So
at
I'm
one
trying to
time.
equate how this works out. Okay.
I understand.
All
I would
right, you
also,
see where I'm going.
I have one other clarification.
Yes.
Because we had not fully delved into the architectural design of the building when we submitted our application, we did not ask to be reviewed under the Spring Hill Overlay District because there are many architectural requirements that we would have had to meet at the time. We've since had the time to prepare and know that we can meet the architectural requirements of the Overlay District, and the Overlay District, based on the 3,900 square feet, would only require 13 parking spaces. So those could be achieved with on-street parking alone. That's my understanding. So we would be happy to comply with the Overlay District if that is the wish of the board as well, and meet all of the requirements within the Spring Hill Overlay District in addition to the parking.
Okay. All right. I'll turn to Mr. Metcalf. You had a question?
Yeah, question for staff. When did the, well, first you, the ancillary building on the back side, that was not part of the original plan that we saw, was it or was it not?
It was the reason for the variance request to have multiple structures on one lot.
Okay. I may have, well, I'll reserve that, but for staff, if all these other variances were approved today, with the exception of that, maybe for a failure to meet hardship or whatever reason.
That being the multiple buildings?
Yes. At that point, would the applicant, since the use had been approved and everything else, could the applicant therefore apply for PUD to allow or not for the second building on the lot?
Yeah, since the other approvals would be by variance, and variances are site plan specific, they could not apply for a PUD.
Okay.
That would only be applicable if the property were appropriately zoned and.
Okay, second question. These are referred to as different parcels, B, A and B and C. The main development, what is the status of its subdivision and the legal lots of record? Are there two or one?
The Rester site is one legal lot of record.
The entire site?
Yes, sir.
Okay, which is referred to as B. Okay. And maybe a stretch. If that property were subdivided into two lots, okay? At that point, if the back portion were a separate lot, even if it were used in conjunction with the rest of the restaurant, there would not be a problem with the second building because it'd be one building on one lot. Incorrect?
No, sir. Because the variance encompasses the entire property, it is site plan specific. They would have to come back to the board.
If it weren't approved, could they come in and do a resub?
They could have the property re-subdivided, and Mr. Anderson, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's not going to impact the variance. The variance
No, I understand. This is for my own benefit.
Okay.
Okay. So it could.
They
Okay.
could come back and subdivide it into two lots.
Right. And at that time, okay, I got it. Thank you.
They could build a building that's separate lot, they couldn't use it with this restaurant use without needing further room.
Okay, any further questions of the board? Okay, this concludes our comments, and now the board will ask either staff or Mr. Anderson any further questions before we come to a conclusion. Mr. Anderson, is there anything to add that we haven't quizzed you on yet?
I wrote down some notes while the presentations were being made, and I think I've addressed all those with y'all's questions.
Okay.
I would ask, let me answer Jeremy's question about the hardship between the residential and commercial, with the how the environmental hardship is it different? From a legal viewpoint, I would say it is different. If somebody's going to convert this to a residence versus commercial, and the added expense in doing the environmental cleanup, if there's any needed, could be recouped in a commercial development because you have income producing property, whereas if it's just residential, the hardship on the owner would be more difficult or more severe because they're spending money out of their pocket and not being able to recoup it.
Sir, no, sir, we've concluded, but I want to make a statement from reading the guidelines we follow, financial, and the burden of cost is not for something us as a board to consider. Is that correct? I thought financial was not something that we should take into consideration.
Self-imposed financial hardships are not to be considered, correct?
Okay.
Correct.
That's my point. All right. Let's get back to the basics of this application. We've got several variance requests. We've got use, multiple structures, side street setback, off-site parking, surfacing, off-site parking, surfacing, and the reduced landscape area as it relates to a restaurant listed in an R1 district, or R1 classification, correct? Okay, so let's go through these as either individually or as a collective application. First of all, I'm going to make my comments and then I'll let somebody make a motion or add their statements. First, having seen, I initially was in opposition. I'll have to tell you that because I was thinking of the noise and thinking of the hangout and places in a residential area. But having seen what this was originally laid out from a development standpoint, and that kind of gave me a little difference of opinion because I think that was the intent all along. Whether these people are still around and still own the property is a different point. I think based on listening to people, everybody wants something done with the property, whether it becomes a restaurant, becomes an office, something other than what it is now, and cleaning up the site. I think the noise is something that should be taken into consideration, the consumption of alcohol near a playground, a area for families. So that concerns me as a board member. And the noise, I would not want to live near a facility that has outdoor bands and places like that. I think that needs to be in an area that's more conducive. I do think that the applicant can have a restaurant on this site. I think that's, with the non-conforming, I think that's appropriate. Whether or not they need the secondary building is questionable. And if they did not have the secondary building, could they do on-site parking? And maybe some on-street parking, as was mentioned, is allowable under the Spring Hill guidelines. So my first thought is that allow the business with it limited to a size that fits within the property. And that will address some of the concerns, which will be that they won't have the building, they won't have off-site parking. It'll probably restrict how this can function more as a family restaurant versus a bar/restaurant. So that's my opinion as one of the members of this board. I'll defer to my other counterparts to make their statements, and I'll accept a motion.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I personally believe that, one, I concur with the, I'm not a lawyer, but with the legal opinion about the non-conforming status and basically the downgrading of the use from a B3 use to a B2 use. I also think there are hardships here. In all instances except for an ancillary building. And I would move that the application be approved with the exception that no ancillary building is built.
Okay, all other variance requests are approved as,
Yes.
okay. Do I have a second? Okay, motion fails for having no second. Chair will entertain a new motion. All right, Chair will make a motion to approve the use, the side street setback, and reduced area landscape variance, but I deny the multiple structures and the off-site parking with restriction on the time to 10 p.m. That'll conclude my motion. Do I have a second? Okay, motion fails. Once again, Chair will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
In your motion, you had a restriction on time?
The 10 p.m.
Okay, was that already in the application?
I was just making it a condition of my motion.
Okay, and that would be 10 p.m. 7 days a week?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I would like to move that all portions of the application be approved with the exception of the ancillary building, and with the time restriction of a no later than 10 o'clock on any night.
Is that indoor and outdoor?
Yes.
The 10 o'clock?
Mm-hmm. So the only difference between my motion and the chair's is the off-site parking.
I'll second.
Can I have a motion with a second? Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Okay, motion fails, and the application fails. All right, we'll take a 5-minute recess to allow everyone to depart. Thank you for your time. You voted to deny? In favor? Lisa, did you get the list of, Lisa? Did you get the list of who voted for what? All right. We'll re-verify that when everyone returns. I believe Mr. Milling and I are the two in opposition.
I didn't want them to somehow.
I'm not sure about Mr. Burrows. I got to find out.
Like, well, we're gonna lose one. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was just, I know Doug's not gonna let it go. Get in that situation. It's that cold up. What you got going on? This has nothing to do with that. Okay, great. What was the vote? What were the nays? Burrows. Thank you.
Yeah, and trying to extend the deadline and all that. So, yeah, and I've just kind of been out of pocket lately, so.
Me too.
No, no problem.
try that out.
It's fantastic.
No, I'm gonna fall over.
I was just going to say that this next application, the applicant has requested a holdover until, yes, January 2018.
So move, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chairman, just for the record, how many times has this been now held over?
We're in litigation, and
I know. I just wanted to know how many times.
Probably 3 or 4.
Okay. I understand.
It's not the lawyer's fault.
No.
Never
is it ever? Aye.
Well, Mr. Chairman, on this one, they had made their applications for the structure, but they were not issued prior to the variance expiring. So out of an abundance of caution, we just recommended that they make this to get their request extended. And we have also issued the application or the permits for construction. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman? Here, and again, an abundance of caution, I'd like to recuse myself, please.
Second. Yes. Aye.
I have some pamphlets that are going to be pertinent. Thank you. Right. Yeah, I've been here a couple times. Yes, sir. Yeah. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'll remember that next time. All right. Trevor Rodeball, 6153 Suntan Circle. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. This is our fourth remodel that we've completed on Arby's restaurants here in the Mobile area in under 12 months. And the other three, we came within compliance of the current sign guidelines, or we're already at compliance in all those cases. We feel like this one is a little bit different in that it is a interstate location. Proximity to the interstate, is key to business. We're located right off of exit 15 on I-10 here in the Tillman's Corner area. The actual sign itself is 1,130 feet off of the center point of the interstate, which puts it just outside of that interstate buffer zone. If you could kind of look through the pictures, and I'll walk you through them, we can see actually from I-10, the second page there, the first one shows the 1,130 feet. The second page shows interstate view from the center there. Westbound of the off-ramp on the next image, and I'm going through them quickly. Eastbound of the off-ramp. So again, visibility is a little bit challenging as it is at our current height. We are not requesting to increase the height of this sign whatsoever. We are simply requesting to take the existing sign off the pylon and drop a new sign on top of the existing pylon, which would maintain, at the feet that are shown on the application there. So the final image there, before we get to the actual specs of the sign that we're proposing to put on top of that pylon, sir, are, you can see the remodeled building with the old image of the sign there as well. So the visibility would be diminished significantly if we drop that down to the 35 feet required. And, it's really pertinent for business on an interstate location. Again, we haven't made any requests anywhere else. We've come in compliance. We understand the ordinances are there for a reason. And, but we're just asking that we can just maintain our current height, not extend, not go any higher, but our current height, so that we can continue to compete on that exit for business. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yep. And we waited our 6 months and then reapplied. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. There's a hotel going on the immediate, it would be to the immediate south of us. Oh, the hotel itself is, I believe, a 10-story building, so it's going to be significantly higher. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Right.
Mr. Chairman, just clarification, is this the same exact request as was denied last time?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. It is the same request. we really feel strongly about this because of the interstate implications, and that's why we came back a second time, to be honest with you.
What's the difference in the sign? How does it look different?
It is a wider footprint rather than a taller, skinnier footprint of the existing older style hat sign there, and you can actually see the physical dimensions there that are listed. So it's eye-catching, it's current, it matches with the image of the building. You know, so we really want to have this new image there supporting the new building. And again, we've got 3 other stores in this area exactly like it with the new signs and the whole 9 yards. So, you know, we're hoping to, again, try to maintain that interstate business without having to drop the 18-ish feet. Yes, sir. Yes, sir, the pylon, yep. We would just simply cut off the top and drop the new hat on. That's what we're asking for. Just approved signage on the faces. If you can see on that last image before we get into the sign specs there, you can see the updated signs are actually posted there on the south side and what would be the east side of the building there facing Highway 90. I don't know that I can answer that question. I believe it would probably be very comparable to our old signage.
I have no further questions. Any questions of the board?
I do, Mr. Chairman. Hey, Bert, in the analysis, it says it should be noted that staff determined the applicant appears to also propose 3 wall signs at the subject site. No application for review of a sign variance justifying such a proposition has been received by the Planning and Zoning Department. Therefore, additional wall signs cannot be considered as. Can you elaborate on that just a bit?
Well, having not read the report recently, no, but essentially they're allowed 2 wall signs and 1 freestanding sign. And since they're going through and putting in new signage, they have to put signage that is in compliance. So if they are proposing 3 wall signs and they're not part of the variance application or a variance application, we're not going to be able to allow the 3. They'll only be allowed the 2 wall signs, assuming they meet the size restrictions.
Right. No, sir. No, sir. We're not at all. The remodel is complete as it is with 2 wall signs, and you can see both of those listed. And then, no, sir. Nope. So we've just got those 2 that are shown there, and we're just proposing again to change simply the pylon sign. So,
Mr. Chairman, the staff, the square footage of this sign, is it within allowable within the regs, or are we dealing only with height now?
Right. So 200 square feet would be the maximum size. So at this point, it is a height issue.
Okay, so they're within the regs on the size?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And Mr. Chairman, I think we have, if I'm not mistaken, we've kind of set a precedent on both sides of this. We have not allowed a sign like this on Schillinger Road. I think it was for O'Charlie's. And then I think we have allowed on Schillinger Road for the Toyota. Is that correct? Is that arguable that we've been on both sides of this before?
I do remember that we did allow additional signage for Toyota, 2 freestanding signs, yes.
No, but they came back and changed.
Yes, they came back and changed because of the Scion brand going away, and they were therefore redoing their pylons to reflect that change.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
The hotel that you referenced is actually, it's not between you and the interstate, it's on the other side.
Yes, sir.
In Burt's, just looked it up, it's going to be a 4-story hotel, not 10, 4-story.
Yeah, and it's on this side, yeah.
Right. All right, my mistake on my apologies on the height. Just know it's a whole lot taller than we are.
On this, show me where the pylon is.
Yes, sir. It would be in the center grassy area directly in front of the building. Yes, sir.
Okay, and the hotel is directly to the north.
Yes, that's framed and fully in development.
Doesn't interfere with anything but Highway 90.
Yes, sir.
Right.
The interstate will all be south of that. 'Cause in your pictures, it almost kind of gives the impression that it's somehow in between what was previously the touchdown road and
No, that final image there shows the old building before it was demolished there, just to the, yes, sir, just to the north of us. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I hate to beleaguer the point, but I want to be careful about precedent.
Yes, I agree.
You mentioned a distance from the interstate.
Yes, sir.
And staff, what is the ordinance on distance from the interchange with the height of signs? Because that's the first I recall us dealing with that.
Well, if you're within 1,000 feet of the center line of either I-65 or I-10, 200 square feet again per face, but with a height of 100 feet.
Of what?
100 feet.
And our height here is what?
Their current sign is 53 feet tall, and they're going down to 49.7.
Okay, so half of what would be allowed. Now, what is the gap between the 1,000 feet and where we are now on that sign?
Yeah, they're just short of 130 feet.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Just outside that range, yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Okay. Anyone in the audience either in favor or opposition to that? Okay, that brings up a very good point, which I had not. In your due diligence, you have to show hardship.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that would be one of those things I think we would consider, is the distance from the interstate. The other obstructions, the hotel was one of the ones that came to mind. I agree with you, Sleep, denied it because we have.
Right.
Right.
I didn't see a hardship that was present at the time. I'm starting to see one at this point because not only do you have the distance to the interstate, but you have a lot of natural barriers, trees and things in between.
Yes, sir.
I use that intersection all the time.
Right.
And you have to really know where you're going. You have to really pay attention how you get into certain lanes in that area.
Mm-hmm.
And the signage would benefit you as it relates.
Yes, sir.
Hotel's just another hardship.
Right. It's part of business, unfortunately.
So, any further discussion on the board? And this is rare for me. I'll make a motion to approve.
Well, point of order, Mr. Chairman, did you ask if there was anyone else?
Yes, I did.
Oh, I didn't hear you. I apologize.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the variance.
I'll second it.
On the hardships that, appear more apparent.
Yes, sir.
Can I have a second? Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Opposed.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, we're on applications 65, 6124, 1694, American Engineers.
Yes, good afternoon, Board. Ron Bordelon. I'm with Pan American Engineers. I'm also here on behalf of Murphy Oil and Lattice Development. Ron Bordelon at 1717 Jackson Street, Alexandria, Louisiana. Sorry. I'm here before you, and this is following the same amended setback that we've requested from the Planning Commission. We initially began with site plan issues with the setbacks. We're sort of sandwiched between Highway 90 and Hall's Mill, and those relative right-of-ways. And without encroachment, we had to do some shifting around, and we're able to get the canopy and the required number of pumps in order to develop this site. It's only 0.6 acres. So we after a few revisions, we obtained city site plan approval, and we submitted for the subdivision plat approval, and that's where we got before Planning Commission, and figured out that the city wanted us to dedicate 10 feet along Halls Mill Road. So they are shoved the setback further into our site and created this canopy encroachment. So just as we did before the Planning Commission, we're asking to grant an amended setback in order to allow the canopy to remain with the same number of pumps on the site. And if they also requested we shift the dumpster. We had room to shift the dumpster over out of the setback. That's been done. We just don't have any further room to shift the canopy east and west. We've already moved it as far north as we can, moved the parking to the south side of the site. So we're sort of constrained by the limits of the site. And we have since dedicated the 10 feet to the city, and the plat has been filed with the amended setback. They just also require that we come before this board and make the same request. So that's what we're requesting.
Well, it's possible. Remember that further north on Halls Mill Road, you do have the VA clinic that'll be going in, as well as all the potential development associated with the VA site. But he did receive the subdivision approval with the reduced setback just for that canopy area, and he's here to deal with the zoning ordinance approval for the reduced setback.
Any questions of the board for the applicant? Anyone in the audience in favor or opposition? Do you have any other items that are within the setback besides the canopy?
It's only the canopy. Everything else has been shifted accordingly outside of that setback. Not to my knowledge, and I'll ask the staff, but everything's been reviewed, and I think the permit's been issued, and all else appears to be in compliance.
Mr. Chairman, I think the staff knows my opinion about the confiscatory practices of the city. You love that, don't you? Huh? Oh, yeah. With that, I move for approval.
I have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I move to approve, subject to staff recommendation.
Okay, subject to staff recommendations. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carried. All right.
Well, the email that was sent out had all the cases on one agenda, but for the printout, we just kept them separate. And the applicant has requested that the case be held over until the October meeting. He submitted labels and everything that was required for it.
So move, Mr. Chair.
Have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Second, any further discussion? All those in favor of the holdover say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries.
Hey, how are y'all doing? Michael Sermon, 30 Hawthorne Drive, Fairhope. Just visibility issues from the interstate.
It is an architectural feature. They're having a kind of triangular bump out similar to what the old Circuit City used to have for the entrance, and that's why they're wanting the medallions over each entry centered. The sign package, yeah. And then below that here on both sides are the address numbers that are greater than 1 square foot in aggregate. Address numbers, yes, sir.
I don't know the size offhand.
Yeah, I mean, there is, in the ordinance, it states that if, address doesn't require it unless it is beyond a certain size, and these exceed that size. He would still have too many wall signs. Yes. 2 wall signs and 1 freestanding sign.
Okay, so if he's got it freestanding and he's got it more than 2 and 2 in equipment, is that 1? On the right-hand side?
This is 1, yes.
Just 1 wall sign. That's all 1. And then you're saying that the 2 medallions are signed?
Yes.
And that constitutes 3. But it is an advertisement.
It's yeah, just an NT.
Which is a sign under our.
Now, this site is within 1,000 feet, so they can have, he can have a 100-foot tall freestanding sign if he chooses to do so. The building code has a minimum requirement that the numbers be, I think, 4 inches high. But of course, fire and emergency responders required to be able to read the numbers from the street. And so that's probably something we need to look at in our zoning when we redo the sign aspect of the regulations.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty far off.
discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your patience.
I don't think we've ever had anybody want to be addressed.
Hey. Meg McGovern, Margaret McGovern, and I'm at 604 Aslava Street. My house that is in question here has to do with the fence. I do own this house and have my son who is a tenant there, Mac McGovern. What took place was before the construction of the fence, privacy fence that he and his friends built themselves with my permission, is that they looked into the international building codes and they built the fence in compliance with the international building codes. Since that time, we found out that the city codes are different from those. And we felt like those young men had done their due diligence. One of them was actually a graduate in building design, so there needs to be a little bit of learning, and has been since that time. This excuse me, this fence was built with the intent of giving some privacy to the side yard, which is really the only yard that the house has. There's no backyard, there's no other side yard. This is it. It's a corner lot, and the fence was built as a nice wooden privacy fence. The fence was to be able to allow the dog to go out without having to be on a leash and not disturb the neighbors. The fence was built so that the gentlemen that are renting the house could go out and cook out and have a little privacy on the side yard. And they, with my permission, did do everything that they thought was the right thing to do. And I'm here to ask that a variance be granted so that the fence does stay.
We received a complaint through the 311 system. Not initially, but again, it should be pointed out that the building code is separate from the zoning ordinance, and the city does, in fact, use the International Building Code, but it additionally has a zoning ordinance which deals with setbacks. Well, they didn't refer to all applicable codes.
Sure. As a matter of fact, I found out that there's been a precedent set at 64 Bienville, which is one street over, a block away. Not that I know of. I can't say yes or no.
It's 64, the one on the corner down there?
It is on the corner, yes, on the corner of Murray and Demui. Correct. The house faces Demui. The fence is on that area where the red dot is, on the corner of Demui and Murray. There's a actual sidewalk, and then the property is raised, and it has a brick retainer wall, and then the fence is within side of the retaining wall. It's actually like a couple of houses up.
And I believe the fence is not actually up immediately on the sidewalk. It is set back somewhat from the sidewalk, so there is some setback from it.
Did we not approve recently a 6-foot privacy fence on the corner of Dolphin and Florida Street? On the Florida Street side with the Nouveau Spa
That was
thing?
around their outside HVAC units?
No, it went down, it's more than just that. It's down it's down their property line facing Florida. Yeah.
Okay. I don't recall all.
Yeah, it's there.
I recall walls in other areas, it's primarily where we've got DVDs.
Air conditioning.
For the same purpose, they're on the corner lot.
Yeah.
Have that kind of privacy issue.
Right. But code-wise, we're okay as far as the construction?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Typically, that applies within the 25-foot setback, so in this particular case, it could apply to the entire house or entire fence, because all of the fence is going to be within 25 feet of the street right-of-way. Yeah. It is in line with the house, yes. You know, again, this area was built, you know, Murphy was built in 1926 or so, so this area was developed around the same time. You can see that it is just outside of the old Dolphin Way Historic District. So it's outside of a local historic district, but I believe it's within the federally recognized Midtown Historic District, but we don't have any local oversight over that.
Well, Mr. Chairman, there's a house that's at the corner of Claremont and Bienville. I mean, and theirs is on the sidewalk. You know, a 6-foot fence.
What's the setback between the fence and the sidewalk?
Probably at its closest point here, it might be about 3 feet. And then as it angles, this could be about 7 feet from at least the property line. Yeah, there is some visual space.
Meg, obviously they lined up the fence on the Demouy side, on the house.
Correct.
But on the Murray side, how did he establish where that fence line was? Was there an old fence there before, or did he just pick a spot?
There's actually the sidewalk with the brick retaining wall, and with inside of that brick retaining wall is some vegetation, and then the fence is within that side.
Oh, so there is one of those brick?
Yes.
Or yeah.
Yeah. There's the
About-
curb, the sidewalk, the brick thing, and then
you're
the
behind all
vegeta-
that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Well, I think you brought up a point. Here's the fence goes outside the boundaries of the park.
On the back side, on the east side, but that could be her neighbor's fence. I mean, it could be.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And we have joint,
Just tied in.
we have an agreement with the neighbor, and our fence stops at the back of the house, right there, yeah. And it's just tied into her privacy fence in the back.
Yeah.
All right, I have no further questions.
Okay.
Any further questions of the board?
I have a comment. I can't believe you didn't bring those two delinquents down here hat in hand that they sent their mom. That's disappointing.
Well, you know, unfortunately, the mom owns the house. So, and he's working, he's an employed young man, so yay. Gainfully employed.
Just be glad you didn't bring Jeff. They definitely wouldn't have a chance. Go ahead. I'll second it.
I move for approval.
I have a motion to approve. Any conditions?
Yeah. That, you've already got a building permit, right?
Permit's already been done, hasn't it?
I believe a permit was already obtained, but it just was not built according to the setbacks assigned to it.
Right.
So, you have a motion to approve.
Yes.
All right, do I have a second?
Second.
Second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Yay! Thank y'all, it was worth the wait.
Fun day. Bye, Meg.
What do I have to do to get one of the comfortable chairs next time? Just try them out, huh? Okay. No problem. I'm Bobby McBride, Rowe Engineering, representing the applicant. We're aware of the staff recommendation, recommended for approval, subject to the conditions, which we're aware of. I don't know what else I could add, but I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Your applicant's in agreement with all the staff recommendations?
Yes, he is. Mhm, right.
Okay, any questions of the board for the applicant's rep? All right, based on the audience, we have no one either in favor or opposition. Staff recommends for approval. Any further discussion of the board? Chair, entertain a motion.
So move, Mr. Chair.
Subject to staff's recommendation.
Yes, Jeff
Do
recommended.
I have a second?
Second.
Second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you very much. It is.
All right, any other business for the order of the board?
I have Mr. Chairman, I have a question for Bert, but the sign up, what, the MW Industrial?
Yeah. What's going on with that?
About time we cited them, I guess?
Our zoning technician went out to the site and has talked to the representative, and they would like to make another application to the board to get a variance for their sign to remain. So.
Was it 6 months in that? 6 months in that the wait period?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know how soon the 6 months.
No, I know, but that's,
yeah.
they
Yes,
got
sir.
6 months,
That's
right?
correct. Not that I'm aware of.